Hi, first graders. I hope that you've had a great Tuesday. As you know, we finished the Trip to the Moon book, the Magic Treehouse book. And so today, for our read aloud, I'm actually going to be reading a book called Astronaut, Living in Space. And it's written by Kate Hayden. And you're going to notice that this book is different than the Magic Treehouse book for lots of reasons. The first reason is because of the genre of the type of story. And so genre is a fancy schmancy word, and we talked about that earlier in the school year, but in case you don't remember, genre means either fiction or nonfiction are two different types of genre. And so we were reading fiction before because remember, fiction is fake. That means it's not real. It means it's made up from someone's imagination. There's different types of fiction, and the type of fiction that we were reading in the Magic Treehouse series is called fantasy. That means there's no possible way that can happen because we know that tree houses don't spin around and spin you into the future. It's a great thought in someone's imagination, but it's definitely fake, and it's fantasy fiction. There's other types of fiction called realistic fiction that could happen, but really we're still a part of someone's imagination. But we know Magic Treehouse books are fantasy. Now, today, the book that I'm going to read is not fake. It is real, okay? And so it is called nonfiction or non-fake, which means real, right? And so the story is really not a story. It's actually factual information that teaches us about a subject. So this is called Astronaut Living in Space, and I thought it might be interesting for us to read this nonfiction piece because it will teach us a little bit more about living in space, and we might have been inspired by that by listening to the story that we did from the Magic Treehouse series. Linda is an astronaut on the space shuttle. She's going to repair a broken telescope. Linda loves going into space. It's very exciting. As she looks out the window, she can see Earth below. What a view! She can see towns and rivers and mountains. So you might notice this is almost written like it's a realistic fiction because it shows an illustration of a woman named Linda. It's not an actual picture, but we're going to get to see some actual pictures in a little bit. Telescopes. So a lot of times in actual nonfiction text, we can see that there's little boxes that give us information. So for example, it mentioned that Linda is fixing a telescope, and then down here there's a little box and it says telescopes. We can look at the stars and planets through telescopes on Earth. But we can see even farther through telescopes in space. And it gives us a picture in the box of a telescope in space. Linda had wanted to go into space since she was a little girl. When she applied for a job as an astronaut, thousands of other people applied too. But only 6 people would get in. Linda had to take a lot of tests. Doctors checked her heart, her lungs, her eyes, and ears. Finally, she got the job. So it shows us a beautiful picture of a space shuttle. And then again, down here, as I said, in nonfiction text, a lot of times there's boxes with some factual information. It says science and space. Many astronauts are scientists. Doctors study what happens to our bodies in space. Biologists study what happens to plants and animals. Okay, so we can see that they're doing some studying here about what happens to our bodies in space. Linda spent 18 months training to be an astronaut. During her training, she went on a machine that let her move as if she were in space. Space is very, very different from Earth. On Earth, a force called gravity keeps everyone on the ground. In space, there's less gravity. Astronauts can float around. This is called being weightless. It happens because of the way the shuttle moves around Earth. So here is the machine that Linda was a part of for that 18 months. 18 months is a year and a half. So she was on Earth, but it made her feel as if she didn't have the force of gravity. Before each mission, astronauts train for the job they will do in space. For this mission, Linda learned how to repair a telescope. She practiced on a model of a telescope in a swimming pool. Being underwater is a bit like being in space. Linda practiced again and again until she was perfect. Then she was ready to go up in the space shuttle. So here she is. And then there's a smaller picture of her also in the pool. This is Linda's 4th mission. Each time the astronauts strap themselves into their seats, Linda gets butterflies. So we know butterflies means kind of her tummy gets nervous. The final countdown begins. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff. There is a deafening, thundering roar as the rockets fire the shuttle off the launch pad. And we can see, and remember, we just got to see that a couple of weeks ago. Spacesuit is this little nonfiction text box here. It says, astronauts wear special orange suits for takeoff and landing. The suits help them to cope with the unusual forces. And we can see it shows some pictures of their suits here. People at launch control on Earth watch the takeoff. They can talk to the crew at any time. In just 30 seconds, the shuttle leaves the blue sky and enters the darkness of space. The rockets and fuel tank drop away. The rockets are collected from the sea to be used on another mission. Now Linda changes into trousers, which are pants, and a t-shirt to relax. She has pockets for her pens and her snacks. Otherwise, they will just float away. So there she is. Shows her in her trousers, which is another word for pants. And then over here we can see this is the control center where they monitor what's going on. And then there's a nonfiction text box here that tells us information. It says shuttle spotting. Sometimes you can see a shuttle circling around Earth. It looks like a moving star. And there's the shuttle. The space shuttle is made up of 3 parts. A space plane called the orbiter, a fuel tank, and 2 rockets. The rockets fire the orbiter into space. The orbiter carries equipment, such as a laboratory or a telescope, in the cargo bay. The crew uses a robotic arm to move things in and out of the cargo bay. There are 8 astronauts on Linda's mission. They live and work in the cabin. The mission commander is in charge. He sits with the pilot at the orbiter's controls. And we can see that this is an illustration of the rocket. And we can tell that where things are and really how big it is. Now in illustration, we know this is not a real picture. This is an illustration, and it's almost as if they've lifted the roof off so we can get a picture of what it's like. A few hours after takeoff, some of the crew take a break. Linda joins them for lunch. She straps herself into a seat. The food is in packages that are held on a tray. Linda ties her tray to her knee. She eats with a fork and spoon, but she sucks her drink out of a pack so that the droplets of her liquid don't float around. So can you imagine having to tie your lunch tray to your body so that your lunch doesn't float around? And here it says space food. There are more than 70 different kinds of food available. Some are ready to eat and others need water. And this is a better picture of what the food can look like. Finally, they reach the broken telescope. Linda puts on a special suit for walking out in space. It has oxygen to breathe because there's no air in space. It also has headphones and a microphone in the helmet so Linda can talk to the crew. A jet-propelled backpack helps Linda move around. So this might look familiar to us because we did get a chance to see in the Man on the Moon story from our Magic Treehouse, they were wearing some of these. Spacewalk. Russian astronaut Alexei Leonov was the first person to walk in space in March 1965. Out in space at last, Linda begins to repair the telescope, but the telescope is bent and her repair tool does not fit. This means she must get the telescope into the cargo bay to do the repairs. Linda tells the commander about her problem. He moves out the robotic arm to pick up the telescope. But will it reach? Linda stands on the arm and gives directions. The arm is just not long enough. Linda catches the telescope. The commander brings it back on the robotic arm to the orbiter's cargo bay. So this is what she's doing to get to that telescope to fix it. It takes a few hours for Linda to repair the telescope. Then she helps the commander to put it back in space. Linda's happy that she's done her job. Now Linda has to work out on an exercise machine. She is lighter in space than on Earth, so her bones and muscles don't have to work very hard. She must exercise for 2 hours per day. This stops her from growing weak. Linda works hard on the machine. A doctor checks her health as she exercises. So there's an illustration of her exercising. So keep in mind, all of this is nonfiction. It means not fake. It means real. It's just that the illustrations are representing what is real. After her workout, Linda washes with wet wipes. There are no showers on board. Drops of floating water can damage the equipment in space. There's a bathroom, though. It sucks everything safely away. Soon, it's Linda's turn to sleep. She climbs into a bunk in the wall and lies down. The astronauts sleep in shifts, so some of the crew members are always awake to work. So here's a bathroom in space, right, to go to the bathroom. And then here it shows the bunks. So we see that Linda and then this other gentleman look like they're getting ready to sleep, and it looks like one of the other ones is awake and working. It's time to return to Earth. This could be very dangerous. Earth is surrounded by a blanket of gases called the atmosphere. The orbiter must re-enter the atmosphere at the perfect angle. If it re-enters too steeply, it could catch on fire and burn up. If it comes down at too shallow of an angle, it will bounce into space. The pilot gets it just right. The orbiter re-enters the atmosphere safely. Linda looks out the window. The orbiter is red hot. It's 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's covered with special tiles to stop it from burning up. Suddenly, a tile flies past the window. So this is an illustration of what it must look like when they're coming back into re-entry. And then this is Linda getting ready. So if we think about how hot 2,500 degrees is, if we think about it, usually we cook things in our oven at about 350 degrees, at the most 425 or 450 degrees. And that is super, super, super hot. So imagine almost 5 times that, and that's the temperature upon re-entry. Linda does not worry. There are still enough tiles on the orbiter to protect it. The orbiter starts to glide through the air. In only 14 seconds, the spacecraft will touch down. The pilot lowers the landing gear. Then the orbiter lands. A drag chute, like a parachute, helps to slow it down. The astronauts have to wait for the orbiter to cool down. At last, they come out. Linda looks up into space. She's already looking forward to another mission. So this is not an illustration. This is an actual picture of when the orbiter came back. Okay, and here, and that was the last page, but this talks about some facts. So it tells us in space, astronauts are up to 3/4 of an inch taller than they are on Earth. The heart does not need to pump as hard in space as it does on Earth, so it can get weak, which is why they do the exercise. The astronauts in a space shuttle use up oxygen all the time, so fresh oxygen is circulated around the craft. Water vapor from astronauts' breath is collected and recycled for drinking. If an astronaut needs to shave, he must vacuum up the cuttings before they float away. People in space can keep in touch with their family and friends using a laptop computer. A woodpecker once delayed the launch of a space shuttle. It pecked more than 75 holes in the casing around the fuel tank. The first creature to be born in space was a quail chick. So we know a quail is a type of bird. So that was the end of our astronaut living in space. And this was written by Kate Hayden. Okay, and so I hope you enjoyed it. And keep in mind, this is what genre? This was nonfiction, because it is not fake, it's real. The topic is real, and we learned a lot of interesting facts. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you made a connection to both our chapter book, the Magic Treehouse book, right? And then also to the launch that we watched a couple of weeks ago, the SpaceX launch. And then also the video we watched of the actual astronaut reading the book about becoming an astronaut. So I hope you're making lots of connections. I also hope you enjoy our YouTube channel. You're going to be able to pull up lots of different YouTube videos of me reading stories. So even if you don't have access to your family's Facebook page, you're going to be able to have access to the YouTube channel. So I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you tomorrow for our Read Aloud. Have a good night. Bye-bye.